Coming to you from our opulent and luxurious 4x8 refurbished room closet at the national headquarters in Indianapolis. With duct tape studio lights and a mic that you barely can hear, we hope to entertain and educate you. This is the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
They call me crazy cause I'm facing all my giants. They try to scare me into thinking I can fight it. They tell me I should never even think of trying. But that's just me, I'm gonna live out in defiance.
Hello, and welcome back to the Tango Alpha Lima podcast. I am Mark Seavey, your host for this show, and I'm joined as always by Jeff Daly in Hollywood, California. Hello, Jeff. And Ashley Gorbolja Maldonado from our nation's capital. And today we have a very special guest, so everyone welcome Hope Seck, who is joining us today. Hope is an award-winning investigative and enterprise reporter who has been covering military issues since 2009. She is the managing editor for military.com. Her previous assignments have included a war zone embed in Afghanistan with Marines and multiple reporting trips aboard amphibious ships and aircraft carriers. Her awards include multiple North Carolina Press Association honors, the 2015 and 2017 Marine Corps Heritage Foundation Award for feature writing, the Military Reporters and Editors Association 2015 Award for domestic military coverage, and last but not least, the 2016 American Legion Fourth Estate Award. Congratulations, by the way. She's also a member of the Board of Directors for Military Reporters and Editors Association. She's a graduate of King's College in New York City. Her work has appeared in just about everywhere that you would care to read military stories. So, Hope, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm glad we've made it through our usual round of technical difficulties here. We're actually starting on time, which is shocking for us. I can't even begin to tell you. But Jeff, we will go to you for the first question. Go.
All right, Hope. I'm the hard hitter here. I don't know if you could tell that off the get-go. So I noticed when looking your stuff up that you had previously worked with the Marine Corps Times, and I don't know if I can speak from firsthand experience that Marines are the handsomest, wittiest, and most charming of all of the branches. And if you could set that bias aside for a moment, I'd like to ask you how it was embedding with the Marines, and how did that contribute to your information gathering to allow you to put out award-winning product?
Oh my goodness. Well, I've got to back up just a little bit because my start in journalism was at the Daily News of Jacksonville, North Carolina, which most Marines, if they're unlucky enough, didn't say their prayers, end up at Camp Lejeune if they're on the East Coast. And yeah, including present company. So it was a trial by fire. So I grew up in Massachusetts. I didn't have much experience with the military whatsoever. And I basically showed up because there was a job opening for a military beat reporter. I didn't know my acronyms. I didn't actually know the difference between an officer and an enlisted Marine, which was a big no-no. I thought all generals were the same, didn't realize there were 4 different ranks. So I was a fool. But it was... I mean, you spend time in a Marine Corps community and you just learn to speak Marine, and it is a culture like none other. It is so close, and I was there in 2009 beginning, so that was right when there was the troop surge to Afghanistan. So my neighbors and friends and everyone I knew in town was deploying, and it was just a really intense time, and the community got even tighter, I think, as a result of that. So that was my introduction. And once I kind of learned to speak Marine, I just wanted to keep kind of honing that skill and stay connected to the community any way I could. I ended up marrying the only civilian in town, the brother of a Marine. So I can't believe I got out of Jacksonville without becoming a military spouse, which everyone assumed I was anyway.
Congratulations.
But to your question, there's nothing like actually going to a location to really help you write about it. So my first time in Afghanistan was in spring 2014. That was right at the heart of the drawdown. In fact, I was there just as the Marines were leaving Sangin for what they thought was the last time in Helmand province to the south of Afghanistan. And that was the site of a lot of crucial battles and really hard fought, very costly. And seeing their competence really blew my mind. I mean, seeing Marines in garrison and seeing them downrange is two different things. And also talking to guys who had deployed there twice, 3 times and said, because of what we did, it's a safer place than it was 2 years ago. You see those motorcycles riding around, you see that economic activity, those families, that's all new. And we did that, and it was hard. That was life-changing, to be honest with you. So, you know, a lot of war reporters in my generation have much more exciting stories than I do about sporty, you know, shooting fights and narrowly missing bullets and you know, spending time in houses that were getting ambushed. My experience was a lot tamer than that, I gotta say. I spent a lot of time at Camp Leatherneck. There's not much going on there. But it was a game changer, and it's definitely helped me cover the community with more empathy.
Where are you from in
Well, I would say
Massachusetts,
that-
before we go too far? Where are you from in Massachusetts?
My family's from Waltham, Massachusetts,
Okay.
just about 15 minutes west of Boston.
Yeah, I grew up even further west, so I grew up in Berkshire County. So
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Western Mass is like the state's best kept secret. It's awesome out there.
yeah. I think most people in Western Mass would like to keep that a secret from all the Bostonians coming out. Ashley, you are up next.
All right, so I saw that you also write for the Center for American Security, and I'm very excited about that because I think it was, the Veterans Pathways to Employment Hurdles and Opportunities, and I know you didn't write those ones specifically, but knowing the veteran space, I just wanted to hear some of your experiences in working with that organization and how your writing has expanded over the years to now being, you know, with Research Foundation, specifically writing to veterans.
Sure. So I have the really kind of heady honor of being one of the Center for New American Security's Next Generation Security Fellows for 2020. And it's this year, which nobody anticipated that we'd be spending the entire year on Zoom, basically. But it is the most amazing program, and I'm saying that now because they're accepting applications, and I think everyone should apply. If you're in the national security field, if you're kind of in the middle of your career and you want to be a better leader or a better mentor, there's a submarine officer who's just an incredible woman who's part of the group. There's a Green Beret, there are military lawyers and people from USAID and the Department of State. Just remarkable. And I've been in Zoom calls with people like Madeleine Albright and Michelle Flournoy and Jay Johnson.
Oh my God.
Right.
Goals.
It is amazing. So all that to say, I am looking for every opportunity. I've been covering this community for about 11 years now, and I just want to hone my craft in every way possible. And it's opened up this kind of bouquet of new stories and new experiences to write about.
That is amazing. So many goals. Just hashtag goals. Can we get that subtexted underneath, Producer Holly? Hashtag goals. Yes.
So my question is actually about some stories that you've written recently that I particularly liked, because at the American Legion we've been tracking both of these, and there are 2 Medal of Honor recipients potentially, Alwyn Cash and Waverly Woodson. Can you talk about where we stand on those and what you kind of project moving forward, like what might be the timeline? Just anything you have about either of those cases would be great.
You know, I'm so excited that you brought those up. Alwyn Cash particularly, it's really timely that you raise his name, because today, in fact, any minute, the Senate is expected to pass this bill that's going to create this waiver that will basically create a clear path for him to receive the Medal of Honor. Now, Sergeant First Class Alwyn Cash, for anyone who's not familiar with this story, you absolutely should be. In 2005 in Iraq, he was in a Bradley fighting vehicle that ran over an improvised explosive device. It blew up. There was a fire. There was a fuel canister that exploded. So he's covered with fuel and on fire, and there are 6 other guys in this vehicle. So even though he is actively burning, he goes back to the vehicle again and again and again and gets every single soldier out. And tragically, he died from his burns 3 weeks later. And it must have just been such a painful period, and yet he didn't hesitate one bit. So it's been 15 years, and this fight, it's hard to know why it has gone on so long to give him the Medal of Honor, but people who follow this stuff, awards and heroism, they say he's the textbook case. He deserves it. So the waiver issue, basically, you're supposed to process Medal of Honor paperwork within 5 years of a specific action, and it's been 15. So Congress just needs to say, okay, we waive that requirement. All we need is the president's approval, and that's looking like it's going to happen. Now, Waverly Woodson, and I'm sorry if I'm being a little bit long-winded, but
no, not at all.
He's an African-American World War II hero from D-Day. Just a remarkable story. A medic. He was on the beaches and saved hundreds. And his name has been raised back to the surface really fairly recently. And there's legislation right now to basically clear the way, say this guy deserves the Medal of Honor. And there's some precedent, because in World War II, in all of World War II, the war came to an end, and 0 Black troops had received the Medal of Honor. And that's clearly a sign of the racist state of the country at the time. And it took President Bill Clinton in the 1990s to raise the issue and say, this is wrong. And ultimately, 9 Black soldiers and troops received the medal. But there are so many stories that haven't been told. And so it's great that those are coming back to the surface now.
Yeah, when my friend David Bellavia got his, there was 15 years after he had actually earned it. So we're kind of seeing these long waits, and there's enough waiting on the Alwyn Cash. There's many of us in the military community who've been begging them to do something about him for at least 10 to 15 years of constantly, and I can't wait. I literally cannot wait for Alwyn Cash to get it. I can't wait to go out and cover it. It's going to be such a great moment. And Waverly Woodson, I was relatively familiar with the African Americans who came ashore on D-Day with the balloons, and he was in that balloon unit. And actually, in reading your story today about it, I saw that there was that book out, and I already can't remember the name of the book, but I ordered it on Audible earlier today, so I'll be listening to the story of him. But it's a great. Now, I know that on your podcast, Left of Boom, you actually talked to my mentor and friend, Doug Sterner, about kind of the politics of the Medal of Honor. And can you just talk about that very briefly on how that's kind of played into all this?
Well, first of all, thanks for shouting out the podcast. As a podcast noob, I have this great appreciation now for how hard it is and the work that you all put in, and I feel like I am learning things by making mistakes. So yes, check out Left of Boom. Let me know what you like and don't like for anyone who's listening. But Doug Sterner, the goal of this podcast was to go back and have longer conversations with the most interesting people I had ever encountered in the military community, and he's one. And there's nobody who knows military awards and medals more than he does. And as you know, Alwyn Cash has been his number one. He deserves the Medal of Honor. But I know he's got a really long list, and I'm so grateful for people like him in the military community who, of his own initiative, he's basically dedicated his life to tabulating these accounts of heroism that otherwise might have been forgotten or misfiled or somehow lost to history.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we will be back in just a second.
Did you know the American Legion magazine is the most frequently read periodical in the nation? True story. Find out why by joining today at legion.org/join.
All right, we are back. And Jeff, you are up with your second question there, buddy.
I'm up first again?
Yeah,
that must mean I didn't screw it up the last time.
Well, you keep complaining that I keep stealing your questions, so I figure if I let you go first, you can't possibly complain anymore.
Well, except that you asked me what I was going to ask before the show, so you still could you could have done that.
That's true. That's true.
All right, Hope. Now the second round, I'm kind of known for asking these multi-layered, complex questions, and you don't really know where I'm going until I get to the question. So in today's world, with our micro niche news, where everything seems targeted to a specific perspective, I'm wondering how you see the future of investigative journalism, which you're so amazing at, and then I'd like you to tie it into how that feeds the content of Left of Boom.
Those are amazingly great questions.
That's
it's
the
well
first
known.
time. Let's give Jeff a sticker for a good question.
Good job, Jeff.
Bravo.
26 episodes in,
Good
and
job,
he's finally
buddy.
asked something relevant. All right.
Whenever anyone has a chance to fire questions at this reporter, I mean, one of the ones that I typically get is, what about the fake news? What are you doing about that? So I appreciate, even if that's what you were trying to ask, I appreciate the tactful way. Anyway, I'll take it all. I love the hard questions, but it's well known that the industry has been in trouble for decades now. I mean, subscriptions are down. People are not buying print copies of anything, and it's really hard to make people pay for things on the internet. So everyone's kind of in the same tricky place of trying to carve out their niche of an audience and get readers. But what I've actually found is that specificity is winning the day. So people go to specific sites, for example, for long form pieces, or you might go to the War Horse, which is run by some really good friends of mine, for military memoirs. Or you might go to, if you're an avid golfer, like Golf Digest, for example, something like that. Those subscriptions are less likely to be in trouble because they're covering things that nobody else, you can't read about in the Associated Press or some of these big national publications. So I think there's a real opportunity. And that's something that I tell my reporters constantly is think about our audience and don't write the stories that everyone else is going after. Don't follow the herd. Our audience is active duty troops, it's veterans, it's spouses, and we treat those demographics differently. We have content that's geared toward each of those segments. But we ask the question, how is this going to affect me if I'm in uniform? I don't care necessarily about the over the top, talking points, the policy, but how is this going to affect the reader if I'm active duty and I just need the information? How can I best be served? And so Left of Boom, I think, is an outgrowth of that, and that I really want to take the topics that people are talking about and unpack them a little bit more thoroughly. For example, one of my upcoming guests is the senior enlisted leader of the new Space Force, Chief Master Sergeant Toberman. I know. The interview is still coming up, so I don't want to jinx it, but I really think it's going to be great, and you should definitely listen. But I'm going to ask him those tough questions. People didn't think they needed a Space Force, and now we've got one. In the case of a crisis or a contingency, what does mobilization of Space Force look like? What do deployments look like? All the things that, whether you're in the service, in the military, or out of it, or former military, you want to know.
Well, I will tell you off the bat, every week when we do our regular format show, and CV's like, what stories are we going to talk about? And he does it in exactly that voice.
It's
I have a few.
Always
That's pretty
Space
accurate.
Force. Always Space Force.
We do Space Force a lot. But I will say that military.com is one of my go-tos.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because what I feel like is, and I'm out here, I'm a Hollywood guy, and story is, and I don't mean stories like journalistic stories about who, what, where, when, why, but actually telling a story to get that information across resonates with me, and I think I think that resonates with a lot of people, because I get in arguments with my friend, and we talk about I'm an economics guy, and so data, I need data, and then she's social anthro, and she's like, no, but stories, and what we've found out are anecdotes need data to justify any kind of action, but data needs anecdotes to humanize the stories. So I love the approach that you guys are doing, and do you, and now that you're in managerial duties, do you see that happening, or do you have to train it in new writers?
So another great question. One of the things that is so great about
That's
two
all.
on the day, I love it. One of the things that is so great about being in a military community, and something I miss from living outside Camp Lejeune, is you walk around and your neighbors, your friends, they tell you stories. They tell you about the problems that they're going through, or a deployment, an issue that you might not have heard about, and that's your way in. That's your way into the story. And I still think those are the best stories. I love when people send us tips and say, help, I've got a problem, I've got a quandary, I've got this unique military issue that I'm not seeing anyone covering. Please do some digging. Help me get to the bottom of this. Otherwise, the process is a lot less organic. So I've got a remote news team, but we're all based in the DC area. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. We're not driving onto bases all the time. And so sometimes you start with a policy, and then you're kind of looking around and saying, who does this affect? And who can I talk to get a better sense of what these numbers mean and the real world impact of that? And thank God for things like Facebook and Twitter and all those other places that you can go to track people down and find out who's vocal and who's concerned, and try to help them as best you can, and connect what you know to what they know. But local reporting, especially because it's in trouble right now, because so many papers are closing and shutting down staffs and all of these things that really make me sad, I just have to shout them out. It's God's work, and I really depend so greatly on the work that they do to inform my own.
Well, thank you for answers that equal my questions. I appreciate that.
Oh,
How
wow.
magnanimous.
Wow.
We're never going to live down his two good questions. He's going to be phoning it in the rest of the year. All right,
Yeah.
Ashley, you're up. Follow up the genius that is Jeff.
Genius Jeff, got it. So, Hope, one of the things that I've been learning, I'm taking a class right now in policy writing, is really carving out time for your creative process. I know everyone has a different creative process, and when you have a deadline and you have to hit a certain subject, how do you kind of take a step back and get back to your roots in writing, and where did you start creatively, and how do you set time aside to continue to grow in that process?
Ooh, tough one. I've been working with Doug Sterner on a project. It's not out there news, so I guess you guys are the first to know, but he's working on this kind of compilation book of stories of military heroism. And I just kind of wrapped up a chapter that I'm submitting for that. And I sent it to my deputy editor, who is a fantastic copy editor and so great at, really critical feedback. And I forgot to tell her that it was mine. I think she would have been more gentle. she gave me some really harsh feedback about how flowery it was and how it meandered and how it needs work. So I've got to go hit my head on the desk after this and sort that out. But I mean, the artistry of writing, something that I learned and had to actually sort of unlearn some things when I became a journalist, is it's way more important to be a good reporter than it is to be a good writer. There are a lot of people out there who are, it's just the facts, and that actually is not a bad thing. You know, I've had to work with a lot of young reporters, including myself at one point, who wrote all these kind of storybook leads about from the dawn of time, people have worn boots. And now the army has a new boot. You think I'm joking, but it really does get that bad.
Oh boy.
And so blending the two, and especially on those feature stories, and when you're telling somebody else's account and making those things sing, and really just trying to hone your craft and tell the best story possible. I think that's what it's all about. And it's a really level up. There are not that many reporters out there who I think do both really well, the facts gathering and the writing, or, communication in other forms. But I think it's so important.
So with that being said, do you have any tips for like the novice folks that are trying to write and contribute to Military Times and the plethora of umbrella sources and websites and stuff that you have?
For sure. So I work especially with a lot of people writing opinion editorials and kind of contributed viewpoints, and we love publishing those. And I actually kind of wrote out a list of things that I want to see in op-eds, and I just saw a Twitter thread today from the editor of War on the Rocks, and he was echoing some of the same things. So I think these are challenges that face any young writers, especially in the military community, who are looking to submit. The first thing is get to the point. Have an argument, have several points that define your argument, and don't start over here, start here and then get narrower. The more precise you can be, the more personal you can be. The reason that your voice matters is because of who you are and the experiences that you've had, especially if you're submitting an opinion piece. And I've turned down pieces from VA officials and various things, and I just say there's nothing that of substance here. Go back and tell me something that hasn't been told before, or give me a perspective that you think is missing, because I constantly go through our website like a reader, and I say, would I click on that? Does that draw me in? Does that provide me any value? Does that pay off if I do click on it? And is it giving me worthwhile information? So that's I think the biggest thing. If you're a writer, if you want to contribute, first of all, say, would I want to read this? And second, say, does this speak to my expertise and experience? Be narrow, be specific. Start with a personal anecdote, end with a personal anecdote. Those are the kind of things that I love to see. And even though I've been a little bit long-winded here, I have to say I've run op-eds from a couple of active duty troops in the last year that have spurred conversations with their service chiefs, because they said, we see a problem or we see an issue, and here's a specific question we want to ask, or a specific proposal. And I love that. I feel like, the Wizard of Oz kind of helping the magic to happen.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
I'll start by saying this. Every morning, the first thing I do every day is I look through the military news. And that's usually, I start with, you guys. I usually start with military.com, and then I'll go to anything Leo Shane has written in the past 24 hours, anything Dan Lamont has written, anything Alex Horton has written, anything Stripes has put up. But the number one story today, and whoever wrote this for you deserves a raise, but unicorn made famous by shark incident floats into history at Coast Guard Museum.
Epic.
And
Epic.
And the first paragraph of it that we're going to discuss in our next podcast was just so spectacular. I just loved everything about it. So I think it's great. So I got kind of two questions for you here as we wrap it up. The first is that my background, I was a lobbyist on Capitol Hill. I went to Afghanistan as an infantryman. I came back and finished up law school, and I had no interest in being a reporter, like less than zero. However, the editor of the American Legion magazine said, "Would you like to be our war reporter, and you can go back to Afghanistan?" And I was like, absolutely. Like, get me back to Afghanistan, get me everywhere you can. And I found out that when I would actually write the things up, it would come back with a lot of red, and then the editors would get it so it made sense. But embedded reporting is really where my sweet spot is, because you're able, usually with an embedded, I don't quote colonels and generals and everything else. It's usually staff sergeant so-and-so or private so-and-so, and I get to tell their stories. How much of your work do you have to be just a straight reporter, and how much can you do more of the fun stories from kind of the lower enlisted guys or the people who don't always get the press?
Oh, so good. And this is like my daily challenge. First of all, gotta say, so Patricia Keim, amazing reporter, wrote that story about the Coast Guard unicorn, and I actually just came from a coffee meeting with her, the first since March, because we're all, sequestered for COVID. But she's wonderful, and I'm so glad to call her a teammate.
That first paragraph is the way every story should be written. And again, I won't go into it, but it is spectacular.
I can't wait to tell her that. Well, I sometimes see it as the balance between brownies and broccoli, and a good, happy, balanced diet probably should have both. And the thing is, you want every story to have value, to not just be sort of cotton candy, and you don't want to focus too much on sort of the stuff that makes you giggle, even when that stuff is the most popular. Like, there's no question people are going to click on unicorns more than they will on defense policy issues or budget, and yet you kind of need to have both. So sometimes it's finding the mesh point where you can use something humorous or kind of an interesting angle to get people involved and excited about an issue. And sometimes it's just finding that balance of the stuff that is just so fun to read, with the stuff that our readers really depend on us for. I actually was having a conversation with another reporter recently about a new policy the Army put out, and there were a couple ways to read it, and he was a little concerned that, if we play up certain angles, that people are just going to, blow spitballs, and it's going to be another like, oh, let's laugh at what the Army's doing, when actually it's kind of a positive initiative. And so, everyone loves to laugh, especially if you've ever been in uniform. You love to make fun. You love to say, what are these guys thinking? But I like to think that we do kind of have a conscience, and it's not just about doing the things that are gonna, what we call clickbait, that are gonna draw eyeballs, and it's not just about doing the things that make us giggle, but it's kind of giving a really rounded perspective on the news. And so to sort of sum up, both are important. I think knowing our audience is a big part of knowing what's gonna set them off and what's gonna make them just want to know more. But we've got that core of just issues reporting that they really care about too.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I see stories all the time that you're just like, it's just a slab of red meat and you're throwing it out to the dogs, and that. But my other question had to do more with the investigative reporting. You had two stories last month, both of which I found really interesting and had shared with people, and they both dealt kind of peripherally with stolen valor. One was the fake Navy SEAL that managed to bilk the VA out of $300,000, and he was a POW in the 80s, which should have set somebody off at some point. And there was another lady who managed to bilk the VA out of another $300,000, where she was, it was Julie Wheeler in West Virginia, who was basically charging the VA for these home things. And my question is less about them and more about what is this when you reach out to the VA, and I'm assuming you're saying, like, how does this happen? How do you sign off on a 1980 SEAL being a POW and dragged to this? And his story was 100% insane. Anyone with any foot in reality read that story and was like, this person's crazy. Like, how much? I mean, you've got to bang your head at times too when the VA won't comment on those. So how far can you dig knowing that you have to go back and play in the same playground again and again and again?
Yeah, it's funny. One of the first kind of breakthrough stories in my career many years ago was about a guy who was calling himself a retired Marine colonel who had deployed to, Laos and Vietnam and done black ops and all this stuff, and had 7 silver stars and 9 purple hearts and 4 Navy crosses, and enough to make anyone who knows what they're thinking scratch their head. But he had been effective enough with this scam that he was asked to speak at like local Vietnam memorial celebrations in front of generals. And sure enough, it turned out he was bilking the VA, even though he had basically not made it too far past boot camp. But he was making all these claims, and he ended up going to jail for it as a result of my reporting, which made the local veterans community pretty happy.
Oh yeah.
So the stories that we end up hearing about are the dramatic ones, the SEAL who was a POW in the 1980s, and this woman who was hiding in a closet ultimately after a failed attempt to scam these benefits.
Yeah.
I think the good side of this story and in these things is that you see the Department of Justice and the VA and all of these other agencies band together. It's usually from the DOJ that I hear these things, and they're sort of beating their chest like, look what we did, we brought this person down, we're establishing order, and it was this joint interagency effort. But ultimately, the VA is the largest bureaucracy in the country, I think, or one or two, and it's massive, and it's impossible. I mean, the scam that is sort of the gift that keeps on giving story-wise is, I'm sure you're familiar with kind of the cream scheme, I think they called it, where everyone starts making these topical lotions and then charging TRICARE for, like absurd amounts of money for things that they're fixing up in their basement. And they have bagged so many people, physicians and veterans and VA employees who are part of this, and people are still paying fines and even, potentially doing time. So they're vigilant, and it's hard work. And I don't want to come down too hard on, a job that I would not want.
Yeah.
And they're not the most forthcoming about these things, but I think what I've always said to military public affairs officers is the good stuff is the news that needs your help to come out, because the bad stuff will come out with or without you. I'll find out about it.
Absolutely.
So bad stuff comes to light.
The military sometimes can be, they see all the bad news, and then you get an embedded journalist show up, and it's 50-50 on whether they trust you or just straight up don't trust you right from Jump Street. Right. And I know when I did an embed, we were in an outpost. There was like nothing was going on there. We took the vehicle out, and I had video of a staff sergeant talking to a turtle. It was just this guy standing there talking to a turtle. And to me, it was like a story. It was like, hey, look, guys over here are having fun like anywhere else. And his sergeant major tried to kick me out of the embed because I had published that he had a pet. Now, mind you, it wasn't a pet. It was just a turtle he picked up. And I was like, look, I'm not the enemy here. Whatever good you guys are doing, I'm here to broadcast it. But sometimes, man, the walls go up and you don't know how to get past them. It can be tough on those embeds. So finally, what do we, now that you've got the American Legion Fourth Estate Award that you had received, and you've got all these other awards, what are you looking for in the future?
I love to tell people that I got the same award that John Wayne got many years ago. In fact, I I don't know if you can see it on my shelf, but I've got the American Legion Award back there.
Oh, nice.
Right now, I am trying to spend more time on deeper dives, to be honest. Running a tight shop of 5 reporters and putting out a podcast, it's a full-time plus job. And I was recently on a TV interview, and the host stopped me and said, "It sounds like somebody is banging on the desk behind you." And I said, "Oh no, that's my 1-year-old sprinting back and forth upstairs."
Nice.
So everything is a little bit more challenging in the pandemic, but especially coming off this CNAS fellowship, in the coming year, I'd like to travel more. I've got a couple of really exciting projects that I'm just starting in on now. And, rather than just kind of doing one-off stories of the day, spot news, telling some longer form stories that matter and have some staying power.
Awesome. All right. Well, Hope, thank you so very much for joining us, and we look forward to discussing your work in the future, just as we're about to discuss the unicorn floaty. It's just going to be
And I have to say,
that and Space Force. Those are our two go-tos. What are you
and I
gonna
have to
Ashley?
say, really quick, love the brownies and broccoli. I just want to say I'm a cookies and carrots kind of gal myself. So
Look at
I
that.
just was like, yeah.
And the
When
thing
you
is,
Stevie,
that
can
wasn't
I-
even there as a prop. She literally has cookies.
this is
on
my
her desk.
This is my cookie wallet. It's amazing. So
Oh,
I,
good heavens.
Wow.
yeah, it's a wallet.
Oh, I've got to get me one of those.
Isn't that cool?
Oh, jeez Louise.
Cookies and carrots,
Well, before we
brownies
go,
and broccoli.
My big lesson of the day is if from your perspective on writing, I think when people go to speak at Congress, they need to bring a unicorn so that the blow up unicorns, that they have that there with the substance. You have to bring the silly and the substance, and I think we'll get more done. And that's my big lesson from you today. And I also want to commend you for leaving Jacksonville with your sanity intact. I clearly did not. So
But
Thank
you
you.
survived. Survived and thrived.
All right. Well, again, thank you for being here, and to everybody else, we will see you next week. Bye bye.